So the title of my presentation is What Can Shelley Do? Well, she can write a mean book, applying a feminist approach to Frankenstein with help from Joanna Russ's What Can a Heroine Do? Or Why Women Can't Write, and others. So my love affair with books began around 1980 when I was 10 years old. Dad was gone, so were both of my older sisters. One had run away to somewhere in Michigan. The other got married to a cook from Shoney's, a restaurant. So it was just me and mom. And that's how it would be until I went to college. Mom was a secretary and a college dropout, but she was smart. One of her hobbies was reading books. We go to the library every week, and as I'd get as many books as I was allowed, which was as many as I could carry, I chose them based solely on their cover. I hardly ever read what was inside. So many of you may know what was popular at this time. Star Wars. I think I got every book that had the Star Wars on the cover. And I would just flip pages and search for pictures. I'd sometimes read the stories, but I could never finish them. I also got a lot of robot books too. I don't remember how much I read from those. I would read maybe one page, but that's how my love affair with books began. With exciting book covers like this one, a heroic guy on the front, a lady he was trying to rescue, some cool droids, technically robots, as sidekicks, an evil bad dude behind them. I was shocked when I learned that they were related. My love affair with books also began with a woman, my mother. She had had a rough life and turned to books to escape. I did start reading and caring about more what was inside the book than on its cover. But this past week, I read Frankenstein for the first time, and I spent a lot of time looking at its cover. Today, I'm going to talk about literary theory a little bit. It's something that I'm interested in. Part of literary theory, feminist theory, and examining feminist literature in particular, some of the points about that. And some of my observations and some questions about Shelley's Frankenstein, looking at it through feminist scholars. And some literary analysis. These are some questions that I'm interested in. So regarding literary theory, before beginning a discussion of Frankenstein and framing it within feminist perspective, I'd like to talk about literary theory. I'm still a novice at this, but it is one of the areas of my interest as both a scholar and a teacher of literature. In 1953, M.H. Abrams came up with this nifty presentation to show how various theories of literature work. So here we can see four elements. Of course, the most important is the work of art that's in the middle. And there's a trinity of elements surrounding it. One is the artist. Another is the universe and nature, according to Abrams. It was meant to be a quote on the objective state of affairs. He calls this the universe, as I mentioned, and the audience is there too. And these are the people to whom his work is addressed. So these are the three basic theories of literature. Here we have mimetic, which is concerned with the universe, expressive theory as artist, and didactic theory as audience. So Abrams states that any work of art obviously incorporates everything that you can see here. We also, I forgot to mention formulist, and formulist is the work itself. Expressive theory on the left, it looks at a work of art as an extension of the artist, You can think of this as the feelings, emotions, aesthetic experiences that are emphasized. And I think romanticism, it could be an example. Mimetic looks at art as imitation of some aspects of the universe, quote, the natural world, human society, and the transcendental world. Didactic looks at literature as instructive, especially in the old days of being, quote, instructive in moral affairs. And formalist, it stresses the importance of the literary form in the work. The problem is that this is outdated, but I think it is useful when considering works like Frankenstein. It's outdated because it predates the appearance of modernism. For example, recent theories such as structuralism, post-structuralism, feminism. So you could probably say that this isn't what is literary theory, but what was literary theory. And with feminism, I'm not going to spend much time. I'm just going to go through this quickly. But part of the movement is part of the movement to rectify sexist discrimination, inequalities. And these are goals: exposing masculinist stereotypes, distortions, and omissions in male-dominated literature, studying female creativity, genres, styles, themes, careers, literary traditions, discovering and evaluating lost and neglected literary works by women, and developing feminist theoretical concepts and methods, examining the forces that shape women's lives, literature, criticism, ranging across psychology, politics, biology, and cultural history. Lastly, creating new ideas of and roles for women, including new institutional arrangements. So this is just to remind ourselves what feminism aims to do. With literature, feminist literature, this is another list that I'm not going to go through, spend much time on. But according to Shelley Register, and these are all quoted, feminist literature seeks to earn feminist approval. So if something is feminist, it must perform one or more of the following functions. It must serve as a forum for women, help to achieve cultural androgyny, provide role models, promote sisterhood, augment consciousness raising. So whenever we want to look at a work of art as feminist literature, we should ask ourselves if it does one of these things according to Shelley Register. I want to look at one of the articles by Russ titled, "What Can a Heroine Do?" or "Why Women Can't Write." So the title of my presentation is kind of a play on words on this. One of the quotes from Russ states that a woman writer may, if she wishes, abandon female protagonists altogether and stick to male myths and male protagonists. But in so doing, she falsifies herself and much of her own experience. So as we know, much of the literature in English is not written by women. And therefore, many of the plot structures don't include heroines. So looking at Frankenstein, we can see that in this case, Shelley did abandon a female protagonist, because in Frankenstein, who can we say is the protagonist? It could actually be, the scientist Victor Frankenstein. A case could be made that it's Walton. I believe it's Walton, who is the person who relays the letters of Victor. Another quote that's interesting in Russ is that regarding a female writer that does not have a female protagonist, is that she falsifies, quote, she falsifies her position both artistically and humanly. She's an artist creating a world in which persons of her kind cannot be artists, a consciousness central to itself, creating a world in which women have no consciousness. A successful person creating a world in which persons like herself cannot be successes. She is a self trying to pretend that she is a different self, one for whom her own self is other. So what can we do? And Russ has some alternatives. She mentions two to start off with, lyricism and life. So when she says lyricism, she's referring to works of art that consist of an organization of discrete elements, images, events, scenes, passages, words, what have you, around an unspoken thematic or emotional center. So I think of this, as language, and language over plot. And when I was reading Russ's article, and she mentions lyricism, I was thinking of a book written by a man that I had researched a couple years ago. It was Paul Harding and Tinkers. I don't know if you've read that, but I also saw an interview about how he created that book, and it was a mess. He mentioned it was like an onion, or how a painter uses what is it, impasto? I forget the exact word, but how they put the paint, the oil, on a canvas, and then they take it off and put it on and take it off, and that's how he constructed that novel. It wasn't a plot driven piece. It was artistic, kind of lyrical work of art, and that is what I most closely can relate this to, something modern that I've read. But thinking about some of the literature by women that I've read recently, for example, Swamplandia by Karen Russell. One of the things that I remarked on was just the language was unbelievable. And I think this is, as Russ mentions in her article, this is one way that female writers can work around these type of these myths that aren't really for them. Of course, another thing is life. And she states that it's clear that women can't write, that they swing wildly from lyricism to messiness once they abandon the cozy realms of the love story. So this statement, part of the title of my piece is, can Shelley write? And of course she can write. And we when we look at this, writing about a woman's life, is it, does Shelley write about her life? How much, when I was reading Frankenstein, I was thinking, how much of this is about Shelley herself? So I can say that, yes, Frankenstein is lyrical, and I think it is about her life. Moving on to, looking for myths that aren't male, that ain't male. Russ dives into three genres: detective stories, supernatural fiction, and science fiction, that are outlets. Detective stories, whodunits, supernatural, things that are not natural, invading a familiar world, and of course science fiction, where we have social machinery, physical machinery, technological consequences. And if you look at Frankenstein, you could check off all the boxes. It's definitely a detective story. I was wondering, from the very beginning, in the letters, we see the large creature on the sled being pulled by a dog. And I was wondering, while I was reading Frankenstein as the book progressed, it was, at first I thought, well, that was, Victor trying to chase the creature, and that was actually what happened. But while I was reading the book, it wasn't quite sure, was that Was that the bride that, possibly uh, that Victor was going to create? He didn't actually create it, but I was thinking, was that the bride that he was trying to, maybe she escaped and he's trying to get her and bring her back to the creature. And then also I was wondering if that was the creature chasing Victor. As we know at the end, the creature does so many terrible things. I was wondering if he was chasing Victor. So there's so much mystery in Frankenstein. So you can check that box. Supernatural, of course. It's a totally strange and dangerous, um, you know, entering their world. And science fiction, I never thought of Frankenstein being science fiction. This was the first time that I read it, but it is known as the first science fiction book. Um, I don't know how true that is, but looking at the definition of science fiction, one of the major themes is the consequences of technology. Some other questions I was wondering was Victor Frankenstein a scientist? And um, these are just some notes that I made. And yes, he did create life. Um, chemists have and biochemists have been working on this for a while, trying to, recreate the primordial environment of the earth. And they have succeeded. Uh, you know, he explored questions, what does it mean to be whole? Um, as a maybe not a physical scientist, but as a social scientist or maybe psychologist. He mentions that the creature wanted to become linked to a chain of existence and events. um, we think of scientists of being slaves to their work, and Victor was a slave to his creation, so much so that the creature even called him a slave. um, and one of the truths of science is, preserving truths. And that was what that, from the beginning of the book, in the preface, that's what Shelley wrote. Other questions that I cannot answer, but I will try, just give my guesses. Who is the heroine in Frankenstein? If it has a heroine, I said it didn't, but let me see if it does. It is Frankenstein feminist literature, and can Shelley write? So I was thinking that the heroine in this book is Mary Shelley. Um, we think of her life. Look, there was a podcast about Mary Shelley and all the tragedies that happened, and this work of art is definitely a work of art, and I think it is reflective of her. We need to look at it from an historical perspective. Uh, is it feminist literature? I don't really know. Um, I'm not qualified to answer that question, but can Shelley write? I do believe she could. The take-home question I have for you is, what is human? So please think about that. Thank you very much.